All right, one more story and we're done. This is a doozy of a story, though. Let me pull it out for you. It's a story of Georgine Martin and Jerry Zimmerman. All right? Georgine is now 51 years old, living up in Wisconsin, when at her office one day she receives a bouquet of red roses. Her husband had died sometime earlier, so she had been living alone. And she said, who's sending me red roses? Well, in the red roses is now this note. So she pulls it out. It's from a Jerry Zimmerman. Who is that? Who is that? She's thinking, I kind of remember, there's something. Well, the note reads, Dear Georgine, I was a classmate of yours, though I don't believe you knew who I was. I was painfully shy, but you were the prettiest girl I had ever seen. It was true. She couldn't pull up his name. Who? Jerry. 4 decades. I mean, she's 51 years old. She can't remember her junior high classmates. Jerry Zimmerman. Well, the note goes on. I live in D.C. now, but I have close ties to my hometown here in Wisconsin, and I was here visiting when I heard about the loss of your husband. I'm sorry. If this approach comes too soon, I will understand and wait another 40 years. But if it's the right time, I'd like to have coffee with you when I'm in town next. Woo! I'll wait for your reply. The letter closes. So Georgine decides, why not? Why not have coffee with an old junior high classmate? And so she sends him a letter. Meanwhile, back in D.C., where Jerry now lives, he's anxiously checking his mailbox every day. Ooh, please, could it be today? He was elated when the answer finally came in a short note that said, yes, next time you're in town, I'd love to have coffee with you. Well, here's the story. Jerry's interest in Georgine began when he noticed her back in junior high, 8th grade. Her eyes sparkling gave him a euphoric jolt whenever they glanced, albeit fleetingly, at him. Jerry's shyness prevented him from saying a single word to her until their junior year in high school. Now, a newly minted driver, Jerry was on his way to school one morning when he spotted Georgine walking with a friend. Before he could talk himself out of it, he pulled over, asked the girls if they wanted a ride. They did. The friends climbed into the front seat with Georgine sitting right next to him. The beautiful girl he had been pining for was sitting just inches away, and it petrified him. Unable to think of anything to say to break the ice, Jerry didn't even introduce himself, just drove in complete silence. We've all been there. You get to school, the passengers thanked their silent chauffeur and went their way. Jerry spent all day, if the girls only knew what they did to boys, all day mulling over his next move. His plan was simple. After school, he would drive around until he saw Georgine walking home. Then, just as he had done that morning, he would offer her a ride. She would accept, sit next to him again, and that would be that, and he thought happily ever after. When the last bell rang, Jerry raced to the parking lot, started driving around school. He soon found Georgine walking with the same girl from that morning. Jerry pulled over, rolled down the window. Fancy another ride? Georgine looked at him with a wave. No thanks. We're going to walk. No, this hadn't been part of his plan. He couldn't believe it. He had no B option. What does he do? He thought of them, the three of them, as good friends from their earlier ride. He was devastated. He rolled up his window and went his way. It only got worse the following year, their senior year. He learned that Georgine was engaged. He'd lost her forever. As way leads to way, after high school, Jerry got a job delivering and then working and then moving and then working for the government, finally landing him in Washington, D.C. But he would go back to the little town in Wisconsin visit some of his high school friends and his family. One visit, now 40 years later. He's visiting with his friend Frank Cooper, and Frank says to him, "Hey, do you remember Georgine?" Did he ever? "I do." "Have you seen her lately?" "No." "Her husband died this past year." All right. Hours later, he's at a local florist writing the note and ordering the flowers. Perhaps it's not how Hollywood would have scripted their reunion. But on his next visit to town, he had coffee with Georgine. That was the first yes. Then he asked her if he could see her again, and she said yes again. Now, with one no and two yeses in 40 years, months later, he asked her as they walked along the lake, Michigan, would you marry me? And if not, I'll wait. I'll wait as long as it takes. Well, he didn't have to wait. Put her picture on the screen. This was 40 years earlier, the high school girl that he watched from a distance. Georgine, 40 years later, became his wife. Come on. 40 years. It's a long time to wait. Except for love. God isn't going anywhere. God is equal to his own commandment when he says, "Hey, I want you to love me with all your heart." It's an all-consuming love. It's a permanent love. It doesn't go anywhere. God is, in a sense, responding to us, saying, "I am loving you with an all-consuming love. I am loving you with a permanent love. I am going nowhere." Romans chapter 5 and verse 10. "For while we had no knowledge of God, while we were his enemies, we were reconciled, we were chosen to him through the death of his son. We were loved by God, even when we didn't know he existed." It's Georgine and Jerry all over again. The man on the middle cross with the broken heart is what he's asking us to be, is himself that to us, a permanent, all-consuming love. The last line here as I invite the worship leaders up. His broken heart, the broken heart of God, can and will change your heart. Beloved, I can't come before you admitting that I have what God has asked me to have. There are days. But that's why God isn't looking for a business transaction or one of convenience. He's looking to change us from the depths of our heart, to alter, even if needed, our DNA.